I first noticed that I was having problems around eating and food and exercise when I was about 15 years old. So I think I was somewhere between sophomore and junior year of high school, which is a really, really common age for people with eating disorders to kind of start experiencing symptoms. And I think at the time I kind of just chalked it all up like, oh, it's just a phase, it's just like a diet or whatever. And then I progressively noticed that I was not really in control of it anymore. And then I went away to college and was like, this isn't an issue, everything's fine. And I started school at University of Pennsylvania. And I quickly realized that it was serious, and that it was something that I was not going to be able to figure out or deal with on my own. And so I went to the Counseling and Psychological Services there, CAPS, and met with a wonderful therapist who was like, yes, you have a problem, which was really, it's probably not something you want to hear, but it was actually really nice to hear that I wasn't crazy, that there was a name to what I was experiencing. I think that something that is pretty common when you're talking about mental illnesses and psychological disorders based on the DSM is that it takes a huge amount of time, and it's just all you can think about. So, it was impossible to think about in class. It's to focus on what I was trying to learn, because I was thinking, oh, what am I able to eat? What am I not able to eat? When am I going to exercise? How much am I going to exercise? How am I going to make sure that my weight is what it is, and my body image, and just all of the things that are your eating disorder behaviors, and how am I going to make sure that I'm doing all of those, and that I'm doing that perfectly, and that I'm just doing everything my eating disorder is telling me to do. And so I think that just being so preoccupied with that really took me away from things. I didn't want to go out and with friends, because you're in college, half of what you're doing is eating with your friends, but if you're not comfortable eating things, you're not going out with friends, so you have very, very few friends. I had some really, really wonderful friends, and they always continued to invite me out, but I was always too anxious to say yes and to go with them, because I just was not comfortable being around food, and I figured someone would realize that I'm crazy if they saw that I didn't eat. And so I think that was one thing. Eating disorders take a huge toll on your physical health as well, and it takes a really, really long time for everything to kind of get back up to speed, because with anorexia, your body metabolizes itself in order to have enough calories to keep functioning. So your body's super, super cold because your metabolism decreases, and so it's it's more important, we're going to keep the vital organs going rather than keeping you warm. So I was always freezing no matter what. So for me, the process started with going to CAPS. First, they actually did a phone intake to try and match me with a therapist who would be good for my needs, and that was probably that was among the scariest things I've ever done. Basically, eating disorder recovery in general is the scariest, but it was terrifying to be I really need help. And them going through, lists of symptoms and things that I could be dealing with, and feeling I was saying yes to every single one, and feeling that they were just going to be no, we can't help you. But there were some really wonderful people there, and the therapist that I met with. And so the first thing that they had me do was keep a food diary, so they could see for a week. I met with her once, and then she said, keep this food diary, and then a week later we got together and reviewed it, and she was like, yeah, okay, so based on this, your symptoms fit anorexia. And so that was the first step. And then at least with University of Pennsylvania, and I think this is pretty common across CAPS, is that for people who have serious kind of long-term things and life-threatening things, they'll often get referred to outside therapy. So I worked with my first therapist to draft a letter to my parents, and which I also shared with my brother, because it's really, really scary to have to say, hey, I have this really serious thing that I'm dealing with, and none of you guys knew about this. So we drafted a letter that kind of explained what it was, let them know that like I was getting help for it and how they could help me and how they could support me through the journey. I went to an intensive outpatient program, which is, I think those are pretty well suited for people who have more on the disordered eating spectrum, or are like pretty far into recovery from their eating disorder, who are pretty stable and who are able to motivate themselves to do the things they need to do day to day, and then just have extra support and therapy and nutrition counseling at night, which is what that program was. It was, I think, 3 or 4 nights a week I went, and I was eating with people, and we were doing group therapy activities and that kind of thing. It was really, really scary, sitting down with a therapist and being like, I don't think I can do this. And like also not knowing what was going to be expected, like what going into one of these programs is like. Because I think I've seen, you see a lot of like psych wards in movies and it looks awful, like one flew over the cuckoo's nest style.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I'm getting myself into. And then I was reading about this one that I was thinking about going to, and they're like, yeah, you can't even have a phone, you can't contact anyone. And I was like, that sounds terrifying. And like sometimes people need that, but with where I was, like I was very lucky to find the UCSD program, which is 15 minutes away from my house and probably one of the best programs in the country, with really, really good outcome things. And first day was definitely the hardest. They kind of told me the rules of the program, that, we do 3 meals and 2 snacks together, and we do therapy in between, what they do with bathrooms, and meeting with a therapist and a dietitian and a psychiatrist who are going to be my treatment team while I was there. And it was terrifying. All of it was really, really scary. And I also, in total year that I was there, if someone came back after the first day, they stayed until they were like ready to be discharged. So a lot of people, eating disorder program is very, very hard. Not that it's easy for anyone, just to be clear, but I think that there's some people who kind of get forced into it, and they don't have a reason that they need to recover. And I think that people who get forced into it often do not do as well because they're just not ready. And sometimes it's like they need to be ready or they're going to die, and that's why they're there. I'm not saying that anyone should or should not be in an eating disorder program. That is not my job. Overall, I think as a patient, the other patients who had an internal drive, a reason that they needed or wanted to get better, and they kind of recognized that and accepted that, I think those were the people who consistently did the best. For me, it was I realized that I was gonna die if I didn't get help, and I was like, all right, well, do I want to die from an eating disorder, or do I want to give recovery a shot and hope that it works out for me? And it, that to me was, even when I was in my eating disorder, was a no-brainer. And so like even on the really hard days where I was like, I don't know, dying would be a lot easier. Not to be morbid, not that this is not a morbid topic, but yeah, it would just needed to go with the hard option, and pray that it worked out, and thank God that's what I did, because it has definitely worked out. So yeah. So my first piece of advice is definitely see a therapist. One way or another, it's scary to tell anyone, but it feels better afterwards. And to know that you are not crazy, and that there's a lot of people like you, and that everyone, I believe, is capable of getting into recovery. So even if you have no idea where to start, which is pretty common, see a therapist and they will be able to point you in the right direction. And then my second piece of advice for people who are struggling in recovery, it's actually a piece of advice from my therapist. It's one of my favorite pieces of advice she's ever given me, which is progress, not perfection. So people with eating disorders have a pretty strong tendency to have clinical perfectionism is what I've heard it called, very, very it has to be perfect. I have to be doing recovery perfectly or it's not worth it at all. Oh, I didn't have enough for this snack. Okay, well, I'm just going to skip all my meals for the rest of the day, because why even bother if it's not going to be perfect? But like knowing that there will be mistakes, you will slip, you will, things are not going to go perfectly. That's why it's hard. If it was a straightforward path, it might not even be worth it doing. But if like keeping at it, and just doing the next right thing, so if you miss a snack, if you miss a meal, if you don't do exactly what you're supposed to do, that's okay. Just next time, do better. You can do better. And sometimes you'll do worse, even when you're trying to do better, and you'll be like, what's going on with me? And it's like, oh, well, you have an eating disorder. It's okay. It's really, really hard, but at the end of the day, you'll get there, just baby steps. So don't expect everything to come all at once, because it probably won't. There's a lot of things I want to improve on. I think that the thing that I'm still working with my therapist most on today is the anxiety. I think that anxiety is kind of a disorder, because eating disorders used to be classified as an anxiety disorder. And I think for me, my eating disorder was a mechanism to help cope with my anxiety, albeit a very ineffective one. But it definitely was really good at making me not anxious in the moment. So like constantly working on finding things that to help relieve my anxiety. So I do yoga, and I'm a certified yoga teacher, and that's something that really, really helps me. Building in time for self-care is super important. I'm one of those people that likes to take care of everyone else and then not worry about myself at all. And I think I've heard that from a lot of people with eating disorders and a lot of people in general as well. So making time to take care of myself. I love doing art projects and that kind of thing, so that's another thing. So just like the little things, being appreciative of every moment, staying mindful, and making time for myself is something that I'm still working on, all to help with the anxiety.